When we started, we had no idea the kind of opportunity that we were sitting on. In fact, we used to think that e-commerce has already happened, and I mean, some of you may know, and we didn't want to build an e-commerce company. We didn't started out building an e-commerce company. We wanted to build a comparison shopping website where you could compare prices of different e-commerce companies. It's when we started building that price comparison website is when we realized that there is nothing to compare. Or superficially there are places where you can find products online, but nobody wants to buy from them. And that's when we started solving the problem. And I think every year has been surprising. Every year, the amount of growth that we've seen, the opportunity that we've seen is surprising.
Do you think, in many ways, e-commerce is being seen as the engine that will fuel India's growth in many ways? Do you see that as a sort of fair expectation? Do you think the industry has what it takes to actually fuel the next phase of growth for the Indian economy?
I think the quality of entrepreneur is very special. The first wave of internet, which is probably Ashish and me out here and guys like Sanjeev Bikhchandani, I think we got into it, quite frankly, without really figuring out how difficult this is going to be. We were just adventurous, we were risk-taking, and we said, listen, if someone can do it, we'll do it. And then clearly we are, just survivors. We're the kind who get knocked down, we keep coming back and all, and that's great, that's a good quality. But the next breed, the next wave, I think, knew exactly what they were getting into. They had learned from not only what was happening in India, but what was happening overseas, both in the West and the East, so both the US models and the Chinese models. And I think they came much better prepared, as did the investors. So they said, hey, this can be as big as we want it to be. I think Sachin's right when he says 15, 20 billion, but, is it going to be 100 billion? Sure, one day. We don't know how fast. That's the only question. It will be huge because this is such a logical way for people to eventually gravitate to. From an economic standpoint, just the value addition that you can make being online just makes perfect sense for almost everything.
You're driving a huge brand which actually created the entire online retail experience worldwide in a country where you're competing with people who founded and are entrepreneurs. So is your experience different in bringing a brand into India in a space where you're competing again with people who are homegrown entrepreneurs?
Human beings, just like everywhere else in the world, love massive selection at great prices and fast delivery. So I think the brand proposition is so centered around customer experience that when we entered India, we had the same conviction that customers in India are no different on the most important things. Now, however, to deliver them those needs, you will have to ask yourself how they access those needs. I mean, customers in India are so diverse in their consumption. I think of all the countries, India is even more suitable for e-commerce. This place has, every state, every city has a different consumption pattern. And it's very hard to grab in a physical space and do justice to what the customer needs are. The small, medium seller base is so powerful and so entrepreneurial. The same base would do photocopying machine when I was growing up. They moved to STD booths and they are running logistics networks, and they're so entrepreneurial to learn new skills. So you start identifying the nuances that either act as tailwinds or headwinds. But at the meta level, the needs remain the same.
Vijay, my next question is to you. In a sense, you represent now the third, player really in a sense that's in the Indian retail space, with Alibaba being a dominant investor in your company. So there's going to be a little bit of a Chinese flavor now in the Indian, not a little bit, perhaps a lot of Chinese flavor in the Indian online retail market. And also, in a sense, you're now coming into a space where perhaps you're ready for the next phase of growth. So what are the sort of innovations that you think will be required?
We don't treat commerce as retail-centric approach where we are the sellers to the consumer. We are very clear that we are the platform or technology company which will bring sellers to the consumer so that sellers are selling to the consumer. So the approach and the way we look at it is significantly different than traditionally it has been associated and attributed in an online retail way. And very simply, we believe that this country is of about 50 million SMEs. We'll be able to sincerely work and work hard with at least 10 million of them and do a good job of serving them, whether this is about their, like I said, payment, financial services, commerce, or logistics, or many other things in the future they will take. So our business model centers around SMEs, and we believe that what they need, we will be able to offer much better from their point of view and seller point of view, and many times better in the market. So I think the approach are different, first point. Second is that India's market is unlike other countries' market, where online was more or less at a loggerhead with offline in a way. I mean, traditional retailers have always found that a loss of their benefit when they treat online. While in India, it is going to coexist obligatorily, which is exactly what it starts from omni-channel in the Western world. But in India, it is day one going to be combined ecosystem. So our approach to the business is going to be O2O, which is offline to online. So my theory is that consumers are moving to the app or the smartphone as a first choice of doing every transaction they can complete. And even if it is about the shop which is just down there, they'll still pick up the phone and try to talk that shop. So we see mobile as a gateway of tremendously large number of consumer base to these small and large medium enterprises that are there in the market. And that builds a totally different business model than the approach of being third, first, second, whichever way you look at it.
Ashish, it's interesting that Vijay mentioned this point about, sort of innovating for a different market. Say for Book My Show, which is one of the earlier successes we have in the industry, you're at a stage where you need to look beyond that first 15 to 20 million urban consumers. How do you propose to do that? How do you look to take the business ahead?
We've got a whole animal ecosystem here. We've got unicorns. I think some of us are cockroaches who've survived, a nuclear holocaust. We've got sharks with investors. We've got rats who are in the media. But the thing is that if you look at the market, most people talk about India being a 1.2 billion consumer market. It's not. If you look at the TAM, it's much smaller. That realization has come in where either the metrics are catching up to the valuations or the other way around. And the fact is that there are 50 or 60 million users that you can cater to today, and there are about 200 or 250 million people who have data connections. The number in terms of debit cards is even lower, the credit cards, etc., etc. So I think there's a lot of work that you need to do at the top of the funnel. Book My Show is working on areas on content which is beyond commerce, where we're looking at engagement at the top of the funnel, and then also looking at, with our commerce customers, to increase their recency and frequency. So the metric in our company used to be very different. We used to run a coffee shop for all these years. How soon can you check the customer out? And the metric now have changed to how often can you get him back, how much time that he spends, and who are the new users who actually wouldn't have a credit card or a debit card, and probably not even a movie goer or a concert goer. How can you address his entertainment need?
The move from offline to online. So is that something that drives your interest in the space? Temasek has wider range of interest in e-commerce. So what do you find interesting in this ecosystem here?
E-commerce has been a very important aspect of our investment process. We have, I think today, maybe over $5.5 billion of exposure in e-commerce globally. And I run that portfolio globally in Temasek, so I kind of get a good sense for what's going on in different countries. And I think the opportunity varies from country by country. So China is different. US is different, Europe is different, India is different. We have investments in Brazil and Southeast Asia, they're all different. But I think the main theme underlying all of the e-commerce investing has been this offline to online. But the way online is actually delivered, the way you go about running that business has become very important. And I think companies in some parts of the world have forgotten about unit economics, they don't focus on them, and that drives companies to an unprofitable business model. Some companies have spent too much time on figuring out the best logistics and fulfillment, but they've forgotten about to understand their customer better. Some companies have decided that they want to put a lot of capital to work, throw capital at the market, keep growing the revenue, but they've forgotten about profitability. So I think what's driven success in e-commerce has been a combination of all of these issues. So maybe I'll just wrap it up very quickly to say, if you can use your capital wisely, right? This capital is not always available. It's available when investors like us come in herds, then it's available all the time. And a lot of it is available, it's cheap, you can get it. It switches off as quickly as it starts sometimes, and then it dries up, and then you're stuck. So if you haven't set your business up for a profitable business where you rely upon your customer for the cash, not your investors for the cash, I think you will be in trouble. I think that's one learning. And that's one thing that e-commerce has been quite good at in some places, not so good at in some places, e-commerce companies. The other thing that's happened, I think now as we look forward in e-commerce, what excites us a lot is the next wave of growth. And I don't think it's just about penetration. I mean, India is now 2% of online, 2% of customers that are shopping in India is what represents the online penetration. So there's 350 million internet users, 2% of that is basically shopping online. That's really small. I think it can get to 10 to 15%. So that excites me, the fact that there's a very long runway and we can actually go out and increase significantly the amount of customers that you'll have. But the question is at what price? And how will you get there?
Indian e-com needs to innovate, but there's also the pressure in terms of competing with competitors who have access to greater pools of capital. How do you see this going forward? Do you think there are sort of solutions that need to come up both on a company level and also on a regulatory or a policy level as well?
I think what is happening in India is pretty unprecedented. This kind of a situation has not occurred anywhere in the world so far, and probably not in any sector also in any part of the world, right? So, if you look at the rise of automobile companies in Japan, Korea, electronics companies over there, then the internet companies in China and US and other places, I think, and now we are seeing a different kind of story playing out in India, where we are saying that significant amount of capital is being dumped into the local market to gain market share, and this has been kind of the playbook for most multinational companies in India so far. And Deep is here, who has dealt with such competition and then successfully competed and acquired the competition eventually, right? So. And that's, but I think India is at a stage where we need to decide which path we want to take, right? I believe, and actually a lot of entrepreneurs believe in India that because of the size of the market and because of the dynamics of, and also the time and space at which we exist, and also given that huge amount of our economy, more than about 2/3 of our economy depends on services. We believe that the next logical step for India is to develop internet economy of its own, right? And not just become a digital colony of Chinese and American companies. I think we have an opportunity to build great internet companies from India, and then be able to take them globally. But at the same time, we should do that not by creating an unfair playing field for some companies coming from some countries, but actually by creating a level playing field.
How would you look at this? Would you look at this as something that needs to be, sort of fought on the level of innovation, where you look at the consumer first and deliver greater innovation to win markets? Do you think there is also a policy and regulatory framework that's required to boost growth?
So we all are outcome of open market, and everybody entered because it was this, and different people got different level of advantages in different stages. I remember in 2014, I had a dinner with Kunal Bell and some other people as a part of Intel portfolio dinner, and I asked him, is there a market for another horizontal in the country? And his answer was, well, nobody left anymore, because nobody can raise any more $100 million, because so much of money has come in, and even Amazon had come in, that now anybody else can't raise money. So basically some of the verticals have become a play of how much of money as resource I have. And that, I think, has been as a design like that. As far as the fight of Indian versus international is to be considered, Deep has been a winner and a fighter for international companies. And in telecom, we actually saw the other way around, that Indian companies won over, in a way, international investors or telco companies. So I believe that there is nothing that you can change in the history. Now that we are sitting here, we can only believe that wishfully ton of money come in this country, and all of us, and I always root for Indian entrepreneurs here, get ton of money to play in the market. So that is what I can say. As far as policies and elements are concerned, I truly believe that I think government, like always, and we've had opportunity to listen to our Prime Minister and many other people, they should stay out of it as much possible.
Yeah, I think it is the elephant in the room. So I think we should definitely address it. So I'm totally with Sachin when it comes to level playing field. I think India has gone perhaps the other extreme. I mean, we saw what's happened in China, but we are not China. And we should stop comparing and cribbing, because I think we've got a lot going for us. And I'm always one to see the glass half full. In this case, it's 90% full. It's never going to be 100% full. You talk to Chinese people, and Chinese entrepreneurs, except the top 5 or 6 or 10, and they have different problems. And they're saying we can't compete with these behemoths because they're, all over the place. They're hand in glove. They're like, you just can't break that cartel or whatever they've got going. So I think we're very fortunate we're in India. You ask a global investor today, and Ravi's right here, where would they invest? And I don't know, there's one global investor where India won't be in their top 3 markets in the world. So we should be very fortunate. We should be thankful we're here at the right time. But that being said, I think India's gone the other extreme, where, we have the saying, Atito Atiti Devo Bhav. We've taken it to the literally, where we've said, we'll give you actually better treatment than Indian companies. It's bizarre, but it's true. The level playing field does not exist. I have gone hoarse crying to the government at every stage, saying that, listen, we don't have level playing field. Foreign companies don't have to abide by 2-factor authentication. We do. We get hurt because they can offer very interesting customer propositions which we can't unless we break the law. Representations have been made to RBI, Niti Aayog, etc., many times, but we won't give up. We'll keep on knocking. Similarly, there are companies who don't need to pay service tax because they're not domiciled out here. Their servers or their legal entity is somewhere else, but they're servicing Indian customers, because that's the internet, it's the World Wide Web. For an Indian product or even overseas, they don't pay service tax, which is a lot. So we are disadvantaged there, not just us. I know Naukri is disadvantaged over LinkedIn. We are disadvantaged over Booking.com. I'm sure companies out here are disadvantaged. So all I'm asking for is a level playing field.
So just for the sake of clarification, I just want everybody to know that Amazon is an Indian incorporated company domiciled in India, subject to all Indian laws, paying service tax, subject to 2-factor authentication and many more laws that some Indian companies are not applicable to. So I think we should use the word Indian into what the impact we do. And I think I empathize with you if there are companies outside of India are not incorporated. But I think on June 2013, as far as I remember, we were incorporated, domiciled, board of directors, all in India. So
Sachin, I'll just add to this element of domicile entity. There was a time when Indians were flipping their companies to international holding companies because we all know that it is tough to list in an Indian market where the restrictions, limitations, use of capital, and the kind of conditions are pretty tough. And that is why the traditional suggestions were coming that how about becoming a Singapore company or some other country company and then making India as a holding company. One of the toughest decisions of my life was, even though I was listening my investors, but telling them that I'll prefer it to remain an Indian company. Well, rationally speaking, there is a disadvantage of being in India. As a domicile company, we are talking about as an opportunity to raise capital from a capital market. But remember those listing limitations that you should first obligatorily list in India and then only you can issue ADRs or any other element outside. So actually, I mean, what Deep is saying, I'll acknowledge this next level. While we are open for incoming, we are not open for outgoing as much.
Sachin, do you want to comment on the fact of being listed over, sort of incorporated elsewhere and not in India?
Well, I think there are definitely challenges of operating in India, and especially if you're an Indian company operating in India, you have to go through a lot more of regulations and scrutiny and not just like regular legal scrutiny and regulations, but also dealing with local politicians and stuff like that. I mean, you have to be able to deal with that. I think a lot more than an MNC would have to, right? And I remember, I think when I was a small example, but this is back in 2011 when we were growing pretty fast. We were looking for office space in Bangalore, and the same place which we took eventually was available for 20% cheaper if an MNC would take it, right? And was more expensive to us. Although we were a decent name at that time, it wasn't too small. And I think that those kinds of things happen all the time. And we need to recognize that internet space in India is still very nascent, and we need to grow it. Another example, right? So I was talking to a Chinese entrepreneur once, and we're talking about something that they were doing. They were doing some office space kind of automation, and like a small office kind of automation for small entrepreneurs, right? So and while talking to them, I realized that the way Chinese think is very, very different, and that's because of the 2 decades of innovation that they have gone through, where if you, let's say, go to an Indian entrepreneur and just tell them that, oh, this awesome idea exists and why don't you try it, the first reaction, especially for family businesses, is to, oh, well, let me find the person who is doing the same XYZ thing in US or Singapore or somewhere, and let me do a JV with them here. That's the first reaction of traditional Indian businesses. While a Chinese person will say, let me do that, let me copy that, let me put that here, and you know what, I'll make it better than that. And then take it back to their market and beat them over there. I mean, that's the mindset that Chinese have today. And Indians don't have that mindset. I want to see that in India, where I want Indian entrepreneurs to come and say, you know what, I will make it better than the person who is doing it. I will make it more customized for the Indian market. I will take it to the other markets from here, and I'm going to beat the foreign competition. I think that's the mindset I want to see in the Indian entrepreneurs.
Amit, will we see innovation in India from Amazon that you think you can drive elsewhere? I think grocery is one area perhaps where you're doing the most in India than you have elsewhere.
I think one of the sad things about this conversation and this rhetoric is the only entity missing in the discussion, the most important entity, is the customer. And I think there's a lot of focus on things that don't matter to customers. Customers care about getting a great service. And I feel that a lot of this rhetoric distracts what truly is needed in India, which is a laser-focused obsession for customer experience, inventing on their behalf and taking a long-term outlook. And if you just take the minutes of this discussion, you would find a very small percentage of discussion focused on customers and things that customers don't care about. So if you just imagine customers sitting in the room, they would have that comment. So to answer your question, we have already exported several innovations that we have made in India globally. When we started working backwards from customers in India, we found that sellers in India have real estate, their small shops that they've been using for generations, and they consider it as hardly zero-cost operations. So trying to offer them a service and charging them for a service to keep their products in your fulfillment centers, they look at you and laugh because they say fixed cost for me is free, and if you can give it for free, then I'll use it. So when you start building products that allow you to pick up from their shop or convert their shop into a pseudo warehouse, the whole economics of that equation changes. And we've actually taken that idea to UK and to US, and we've seen a great deal of success elsewhere.
In my world, it's slightly different. I think movie going has been so evolved in India than the rest of the world. Even if you go into the US, they never have allocated seating. They didn't have reserved seating. They don't have an intermission and a break. So we were solving for problems well before even the US could think about some of these. So in Book My Show, you could reserve a seat. We now have iBeacons to tell you directions, which is making it usher-free to find your seat the fastest. We combine combos with food, and we've given the control to the cinema manager. So if he's got 20% inventory left for a night show, to be able to push notify those customers which are sitting inside to come out in the intervision and then buy those products at a discount. These don't exist. So we were looking at an acquisition of a company in the US, and when we did our due diligence, we found out that it was so many generations behind in terms of tech and consumer centricity that we actually decided not to buy. That was another thing, that the market there has remained flat for movie ticketing.
On that note, I should say thank you very much for being here and for sharing your thoughts. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/etnow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at etnowlive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/etnow.